This is truly an everything, everywhere, all at once scenario.
Stark and stunning warnings, the United States vulnerable and at risk.
Preparation to wreak havoc and cause real-world harm to American citizens and communities.
Chinese hackers targeting America, but why? And how can they be stopped?
There's no reason for them to be in our water. There's no reason for them to be in our power.
This half hour, what you need to know about the threats and how to keep your own home safe. On this episode of Scripps News Reports, Hacking America. What we are talking about is not hypothetical. It is not some distant threat. It is already happening right now, even as we speak. In just the past week, a commonly used VPN service was exploited. More than a dozen government agencies were affected, some tied to the nation's defense. Companies also affected. Researchers and the government blaming a Chinese hacking group said to be backed by the government in Beijing. This graphic shows the staggering rise in the number of customers affected in just a matter of days. But why does China want to target our infrastructure? What's in it for them? That important discussion is straight ahead. But for starters, know this. The effects of hacks like these are profound, with the potential to upend our normal everyday lives. Intel officials are warning a recent cyber attack may be the blueprint for what's to come. Maya Rodriguez starts our coverage.
Americans love their vehicles. More than 115 million cars and trucks hit the road in the U.S. every day. But what if suddenly there was no gasoline to be found? That's what happened at some gas stations in 2021. Long lines of cars and fuel shortages across multiple states after a ransomware cyber attack disabled the Colonial Pipeline, a more than 5,000-mile-long system that carries gas used by tens of millions of drivers.
Colonial Pipeline is the biggest one of those transport routes. It takes about 2.7 million barrels a day of refined products from Texas to the Northeast.
A criminal syndicate carried out that cyber attack, attempting to extract a ransom from the company. A frightening real-world example of how hacks have the potential to disrupt our daily lives. And U.S. Intel officials say the pipeline attack may be just the beginning, and they have eyes on China.
It is Chinese military doctrine to attempt to induce societal panic in their adversary. And arguably, the Chinese government got a little bit of a taste of this in the aftermath of the ransomware attack on Colonial Pipeline.
Officials warn China is looking to target critical infrastructure across the country.
Now imagine that on a massive scale. Imagine not one pipeline, but many pipelines disrupted. Telecommunications going down so people can't use their cell phone. People start getting sick from polluted water. Trains get derailed. Air traffic control system, port control systems are malfunctioning. This is truly an everything, everywhere, all at once scenario.
FBI Director Christopher Wray echoes that stark warning.
And let's be clear, cyber threats to our critical infrastructure represent real-world threats to our physical safety.
But how to best address it? Experts say that's complicated by the fact that a large portion of U.S. critical infrastructure is run by private companies.
85% of America's critical infrastructure is in the hands of the private sector.
Scott White is an associate professor and director of the cybersecurity program at George Washington University. He says part of the issue is that private enterprise is often in charge of its own cybersecurity.
Other nations, even Western nations, will use legislation. The United States tends to try to incentivize organizations or companies in becoming cyber compliant to certain standards. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
But then that potentially could put some national security interests at risk, correct?
It does. It can and does.
Senate Bill 2251, a cybersecurity act introduced in the U.S. Senate last summer, would help modernize cybersecurity efforts, but only across federal agencies. Private enterprise remains a different matter.
Often cybersecurity operates under this kind of emergency room mentality. There's always a fire that needs to be put out.
Nick Merrill is with the Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity at the University of California, Berkeley. He says the online threat posed by Chinese hackers is real.
We all buy a lot of cheap stuff on Amazon that's made in China. Quite a lot of it is connected to the internet, connected to our home networks. And all of those are also potentially vectors for pre-positioning for an attack. So, this is something that people in cybersecurity have had their eye on for quite some time.
And he says there are some potential cyber attacks that keep him up at night.
There's a scenario that I spend most of my time worrying about, which is, you try to use a credit card and it doesn't work, and actually no one's credit card works. And, really the internet is off for most purposes, and, society grinds to a halt.
Cybersecurity experts we spoke to say as critical infrastructure becomes more automated, less reliant on human beings, and more reliant on computers, the more vulnerable they become to an attack. Del?
Maya Rodriguez in Washington. Maya, thank you very much. If you were to ask any cybersecurity expert, or even the head of the FBI, which country is our biggest cyber threat, they're likely to answer China.
We have uncovered what they're doing, and we will continue to do that.
We are joined now by one of America's leading voices in this space. Malcolm Nance has more than 30 years experience in U.S. intel. He is a 5-time New York Times bestselling author and also a former officer specializing in cryptology. His book, The Plot to Hack America, How Putin's Cyber Spies and WikiLeaks Tried to Steal the 2016 Election. Malcolm, it's always good to see you. Why are Chinese hackers trying to infiltrate American infrastructure and systems?
American infrastructure is a very broad network of disparate communications that use an enormous amount of computing power. The Chinese government views all of that computing power as a potential place to steal information or to get information that will advance their technology or allow them to overmatch the United States in terms of war, of shutting down systems if they have.
Okay, let me ask the question everybody always asks. People always say, they spy on us, we spy on them. A common defense you hear is people saying the U.S. does the same thing to other countries, including China. I want to play for you a response on that point from the commander of U.S. Cyber Command and get your reaction on the other side.
Responsible cyber actors of democracies like our own do not target the civilian infrastructure. There's no reason for them to be in our water. There's no reason for them to be in our power. This is a decision by an actor to actually focus on civilian targets. That's not what we do.
Malcolm, we are left to only imagine what our defensive capabilities are to a cyber attack. But you know and I know about those budget areas called black boxes in the defense contracts. What are our offensive capabilities, and do we have some?
Our biggest offensive weapons were actually released by someone in the U.S. intelligence community. We just sent a CIA officer to prison for 40 years for showing CIA cyber capabilities that we had. Some have been very successful, like the Stuxnet virus, which was released against Iran over a decade and a half ago in cooperation with Israel to destroy, their ability to generate nuclear materials. But our weapons that we use, the difference between us and the United States and Russia or China, North Korea, Iran, we keep those in the holster. We keep our bullets safely stored away, and we don't use it every day. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, they use it like we drink coffee. Offensive cyber weapons are the Starbucks of their cyber warfare world.
Let's talk about TikTok. In recent months, we've been hearing a lot about it, got a lot of attention on Capitol Hill, the social media company owned by ByteDance, which is based in Beijing. The FBI director recently asked questions about that topic, and I want to highlight this response because I don't think most people picked up on it.
I mean, just to understand, if the CCP were to want to change TikTok feeds to bias one candidate or another in the upcoming presidential election, would they be able to do so?
My understanding is that under Chinese law, that would be something that they would be permitted to do.
And we already know they influence Chinese children to study science and math. Could they be able to suggest to American kids that they use more drugs?
again, my understanding is that the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party, if it wants to exercise that authority, can easily exercise that authority.
So, Malcolm, that being said, do you trust TikTok? And let me just push back and say, these are the people that give us those dance videos.
You know, I've been playing in this game for almost 4 decades in information warfare and cyber warfare. Let me tell you something. To me personally, I've seen TikTok being used as an information warfare system. It is a weapon of indoctrination. I am a big advocate for eliminating TikTok. And its algorithms reward people who are doing things which literally damage democracy. But the sea of information that flows on TikToks are the dance videos and the puppy videos and the kitty videos. And in between that, you get situations like where the letter to America from Osama bin Laden about Palestine, which was his justification for mass murdering 3,000 American citizens. It is a weapon of information. It's already been deployed against us. And to tell you the truth, the best thing we could do is kill it and have American, American developers come up with something that isn't a little more focused from the Central Communist Party of China.
Malcolm, final question. I want to circle back to cybersecurity. Back here at home, what can we do to harden our defenses?
The single easiest thing that you can do to harden your defenses is one, make sure you have 2-factor authentication on your phones, all right? Most cyber impacts into your life are fraud. Don't click on any links you get on your phone. It's as simple as that. That's where the phishing scams happen, but it's also where malicious malware can be brought onto your phone, onto your laptop. If you don't know the source, don't click on it. That's where your Nigerian scammers come from too. So that is one of the best. Your cyber hygiene, which Americans are awful at, you have to think about it when you use these systems.
Fascinating you put it that way. Perhaps we might listen. Malcolm Nance, former Naval Intelligence Officer. Malcolm, as always, we appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Straight ahead, imagine a children's hospital taken offline. Parents unable to schedule appointments, children unable to get their surgeries or even their prescriptions. That cyber attack happening now in a major American city. Plus, do you have internet at home? Of course you do. And you may be at risk of being hacked. You need to stay here for that vital conversation. That's next. For more than a week, Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago has effectively been taken offline. Families with appointments left in the dark, most patient records now inaccessible. The FBI is involved, but the investigation is going to take time. It's called a ransomware attack. Hackers infiltrate the network and then lock and encrypt everything. In order to get it unlocked, the victim is made to pay a ransom, sometimes in Bitcoin or another untraceable currency. The worldwide cost of attacks like these is skyrocketing. $700 billion in 2017, $13 trillion in 2028. A recent study says more than 75% of ransomware payments are for at least $1 million. Not yet mentioned, by the way, in all of this is the potential effect on you in the safety of your own home. Clayton Sandell has more of what you need to know.
The ongoing cyber war between the U.S. and China has a new front. The FBI is warning that certain internet routers are being hijacked by Chinese hackers. The FBI says the attacks target older routers with outdated security made by Cisco and Netgear. Hackers can secretly install malware and launch cyber attacks on critical U.S. infrastructure.
Our water treatment plants, our electrical grid, our oil and natural gas pipelines, our transportation systems, and the risk that poses to every American requires our attention now.
Cyber experts say you can protect yourself by making sure your router gets regular updates. Check the settings to make sure remote access is turned off. And if the router is 10 or 15 years old, it may be time to buy a new one. It's not the only cyber attack linked to China. Stephen Adair's company discovered Chinese hackers exploited systems made by Avanti that lets workers log in remotely, potentially exposing logins and passwords.
And that then enables them to steal documents, steal email, start accessing what other machines are connecting to, and basically can get at anything that an employee or other member of the organization can. So it can become basically a worst case scenario for an organization.
If you believe you have been hacked, the FBI says you can make a report at ic3.gov. Clayton Sandell, Scripps News, Denver.
Sam Sabin is with us now, and if you've read anything about cybersecurity online, Sam is always the first place to start. She is a cybersecurity reporter at Axios and writes the Code Book newsletter, which comes out twice a week. And Sam, I just mentioned how cyber attacks are projected to grow exponentially over the years. The United States is now the most targeted country in the world for cyber attacks. Are hackers getting better, or are we getting worse, I guess, more vulnerable?
You could argue it's a little bit of both, right? It has always been a cat and mouse game that is in favor of, I guess, the cat in this metaphor. The hackers are always a little bit ahead of us, unfortunately, as defenders. They are constantly thinking of new tricks to pull out of their sleeves. And frankly, it's not that hard for them to hack us, right? If people don't have multi-factor authentication on, if they have simple passwords that are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which still exist, it's really not that hard for a sophisticated hacker to figure out just an unsophisticated way to break into your account.
Sam, let's talk about what we heard from Clayton Sandell just a moment ago. Risk inside our own homes. Clayton mentioned outdated routers. What would you tell the average person about keeping their network secure?
Totally. So it all depends on what kind of router you have, right? They're super vulnerable. If you have one that you bought yourself, maybe you went to Best Buy, you thought, oh, I don't want to pay that monthly rental fee to Comcast. This is going to be a super easy way to save money. You are also now responsible for security updates on your router, and you probably did not think about that. As long as the Wi-Fi is running, I'm also happy. They're super easy targets, and nation states and cyber criminals alike are onto that. They provide access into any of the internet traffic running through your home, whether it's from your laptop, your phone, your Bluetooth speakers. And if you are not running those security updates, which many of us probably are not, it's super easy for hackers to just keep targeting the same vulnerabilities, keep going after the same security flaws to access a vast trove of personal data about you and everything that you do online.
Sam, in the past few weeks, you've written about the United States government warnings on China. I want you to listen to this from FBI Director Christopher Wray.
To quantify what we're up against, the PRC has a bigger hacking program than that of every major nation combined. In fact, if you took every single one of the FBI's cyber agents and intelligence analysts and focused them exclusively on the China threat, China's hackers would still outnumber FBI cyber personnel by at least 50 to 1.
50 to 1. What have you been tracking about China's capabilities and our governmental response?
Yeah, I mean, the number is stark. It has been sitting with me for the past days since hearing that hearing. China has become progressively more destructive in their capabilities, unlike maybe even years earlier where during the Obama administration, the big concern was intellectual property theft, the stealing of state secrets, other things that are pretty common among nation states. China in recent years has started targeting critical infrastructure, right? They are laying the foundation to hack water utilities, to hack ports, and a variety of other critical infrastructure across the United States in the event that maybe they want to cause societal panic or launch some sort of destructive attack. That is pretty unheard of compared to other nation states. But we've also seen companies like Microsoft and other large tech giants saying that they too have also been hit in recent years by the Chinese government. Most of that is espionage, but it is painting a pretty stark and frankly scary picture of what China is capable of.
Sam, at this point, there doesn't seem to be a need to stock money in a shoebox under the bed or a stockpile of food and water in the basement. What is some practical advice you give us about cybersecurity in our own lives, about being prepared?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I don't want anyone sitting at home thinking, let's unplug everything, let's go out into the woods and never come back to society. We are not quite there yet, unless that is a personal choice you want to make. But for now, the best thing you can do, have a strong password. Use multi-factor authentication, those things where you get like a little text code that confirms your identity. Install that on any account you can. Be mindful of what you post online, what you share online, and also be mindful of what devices are connecting to Wi-Fi at any point in time. And lastly, install those software updates. They're super annoying. I get it. You might have to restart your computer, but they will go a long way to protecting your devices.
Again, you are talking specifically to me, Sam Sabin, cybersecurity reporter at Axios. Sam, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much.
You got it. Up next, what's China's response been to all of this? Have things really improved since President Biden met President Xi Jinping on American soil?
I was hoping after the APEC summit in San Francisco when President Xi showed up that there'd be a bit of a thaw, but it doesn't look like it's happened, at least in this domain.
China says any accusations it is hacking American infrastructure and government systems simply aren't true, baseless. It says the U.S. is instead the real problem here. The Chinese foreign minister saying, quote, China is the biggest victim of cyber attacks. That is a claim the United States dismisses outright. Intel officials say the threat of Chinese cyber attacks is only getting worse day by day. That is why the government is now sounding the alarm. Cybersecurity experts are asking you to stay vigilant. As for us here at Scripps News, we will stay on top of this story, reporting any threats in anything that is happening. For now, I'm Del Walters in Atlanta. Thanks for joining us for this week's edition of Scripps News Reports, Hacking America.